This is the Christmas Movie Screenwriter Podcast, episode number 15. Hello and welcome to the Christmas Movie Screenwriter Podcast. I'm your host, Caryn McCann. The Christmas Movie Screenwriter is a podcast about writing, producing, and selling Christmas movies. You can check out my top takeaways and show notes in the website. Just go to www.christmasmoviescreenwriter.com and look for this episode, which is number 15. A quick few words about what I'm working on. I'm just about finished with my faith-based movie script. It's a new market for me, but I was very inspired to write the story, which I hope will make you think. And at the time of this recording, I am currently in Spain and getting lots of ideas for a future script. I've got a few irons in the fire, as folks are already reading a couple of my other scripts, one of which is a Christmas script and the other one is a female-led thriller. So hopefully I'll have some good news soon. And now here is the main segment with my interview with writer, producer, director, James Temple. James R. Temple started out as executive of development for North by Northwest Entertainment before launching an independent company to produce his own scripts, which he also directs. His credits so far include the YA adventure, The Cascadia Treasure, the Civil War epic, Vivandier, and the Christmas rom-com, The Christmas Pledge, all currently in distribution with BMG Global. Well, James, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I told the audience a little bit about you, but why don't you take a minute and tell us about yourself and your work?
All right. Well, I've been working in this industry for about 15 years, and I'm one of those independent-minded bullheads who absolutely has to go his own way. I worked for, a larger company at the start, and ever since then, I've been kind of just piloting my own ships. I do have, two producing partners that I've worked with for a number of years now, and they are totally of the same mindset. We're three independent-minded bullheads who somehow manage to stick together and not annoy each other too much.
Okay. That's great. Now, can you share your journey of breaking into the Christmas industry as a Christmas movie screenwriter?
Breaking into the industry. Saying I've broken into the industry is putting it a bit strongly. Like I say, as I said before, we tend to sort of work on the outside, on the periphery. To layer in some more detail on my bio and my earlier story, I worked for North by Northwest Entertainment for a while. The development program eventually was shut down when the company went a different direction. And, I'd had some philosophical differences on how to get movies made. And so I went my own way. And since then, I've made 3 movies totally independently, not just writing them, but also producing them, directing them, editing them, and masterminding the releases to some extent. The first movie I ever did was Cascadia Treasure. That was a young adult adventure made basically on the budget of a used car.
Okay.
That was our starting point. That was our starting point. But we got it into distribution with BMG Global. And with those proceeds, made the next one. Big step up for us. Like I say, Civil War epic, Vivandier. Wow. Thank you so much for getting the pronunciation right, by the way.
It was easy.
And that got us a couple things, or got me a couple things. First of all, I figured out who my ride or die people were, the people who are going to be with me on this journey no matter what. And that's my other 2 bullheads that I mentioned.
Okay.
And also it got us into a rapport with a distributor, specifically BMG Global, although we've had discussions with others. And we got an ear on the state of the market. And at that time, just a couple of years ago, they had considerable success with another Christmas movie called Match Made at Christmas. I don't know if you heard about it. It was actually even made just one town over from Spokane, where I live.
Match Made at Christmas.
Match Made at Christmas.
Okay.
A Match Made at Christmas. And it had done really well for them, and they were looking for another one, but apparently the makers were not in a position to make another one. So we said, oh, well, we'll do that. Which was new frontiers for us because we had not made a Christmas movie before, and none of us were Christmas movies fans, especially.
Okay.
Ever since then, I've been startled by how many people are Christmas movie fans, and specifically fans of Hallmarky, as we call it, Christmas rom-coms. One of my oddest moments was talking to a guy I know who is a sergeant with the local police force. He's like, oh, I love those movies. My DVR is full of those. And I'm like,
That's great.
did not call that. So we
That
decided we were going to go ahead and make one.
did you just reach out to BMG Global, just cold email, or somehow you knew them?
The relationship goes back, what is it now? 3 going on 4 years. We made our first movie on spec. We didn't have a distributor when we made it. And so we went through the list of all companies that distributed films at the AFM for, I think, 2019,
Mm,
figured out which ones handled that type of movie, which I
okay.
think brought the number down from about 400 companies to 60,
Okay,
and
good.
contacted every single one of them,
Okay.
which resulted in an astounding panoply of responses. And let's just say we got quite an education in human psychology as well. But Bridgestone was the one we ultimately went with.
Okay, great, great. Now I know, this is very exciting interview
Mhm.
for me because this is like your first Christmas sale. So I'm sort of emphasizing that. But I'm going to ask you anyway, even though you have a bright future in front of you. Let's say, how do you balance meeting audience expectations while staying fresh and not predictable or cliche when it comes to Christmas movies?
I think the first step is, first of all, being aware of what the genre payoffs are and respecting those to the extent that, don't go into them thinking that it's cheesy or it's stupid. If you think that, you may be in the wrong business. Go into them
Right.
thinking, people respond to this. Why? People respond to this for good reasons. Again, why? And then in relation to those, we do our best to, as I like to say, speak our truth. I mean,
Mm,
we have our own thoughts on these payoffs and expectations ourselves. An example would be at Christmas Pledge. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to watch it yet yourself, but it's a bit of a play. It's a bit of a workplace comedy, and it's a bit of a play on the usual idea of the female lead who has to, choose between, charming small town life and a career in the big city. And we decided from the outset, we're not going to make her choose.
good.
We're
No,
not going to make her
I
choose.
look forward to watching that. No, I haven't seen it yet.
And so it's all part of her character arc that she has to not reconcile these things, but just it's one of those things she has to accomplish to become who she is. And the movie does not make her choose between, a nice family life or a nice life in a small town and her career. It says this is all an element of who she is. This is what she needs to actualize who she is, for lack of a better term. But it's that kind of thing where you say, look at the payoffs, respect them, understand the reasons for them, and then speak your truth to them. You may not satisfy them in the same way or even straight on,
I think
but
that's very fresh because we have seen many times where the girl sort of gives up her career, goes to the small town, and I love your idea where she doesn't have to choose.
to me, that's a bit of a lack of imagination. I don't know if do you remember Bill Watterson, the guy who wrote the Calvin and Hobbes comic strip?
Yes,
He once wrote that stereotypes are the hallmark of writers too lazy to honestly observe the world.
there you go.
And he was talking about characters specifically, but that applies to many other things in writing.
That's right. That's right. And you really have to push boundaries there because uh Christmas movies, dare I say, have a reputation for being formulaic. So you really have to speak your truth, as you say.
Rightly or wrongly, they absolutely do.
Exactly.
Although that applies to a lot of other genres, to be fair.
That's true. Now, after you finish the script and it's ready to go out, what's your next step? And how do you move it towards getting into production?
The usual answer from someone who might have broken into the industry would be something like, "Oh, well, I take it to my agent, and then we try to get, we shop it out to studios, that kind of thing." We've never done that. We've never had a script sale or a sale of any kind. We've never even sold a movie even to BMG. We have a distribution deal where they get certain rights for a certain period, but we have always owned our own stuff.
Good.
So moving towards that, when I'm writing it, my partners are fully involved. One of them is older than I am, and so he has a lot of contacts around the area. And finding locations often means going through his Rolodex and seeing who he knows, which is darn near everybody in town. For our
Oh,
last movie, we just flipped through his Rolodex, and we needed like a high-rise office to establish, some supremely powerful business person, and he got a 10th story high-rise corner office.
wow.
Just a buddy of his that he's known for a while, for some significant investment firm in this amazing like 1914 era office building with glorious architecture.
Wow.
We'd be able to shoot all through it from the lobby all the way up to the roof. That kind of thing. Those elements inform the script because it tells us, what we can write around. Sometimes it's called the Rodriguez list in reference to the director Robert Rodriguez. When he made his first movie, he made a list of all the things he could get, and he wrote scenes around that. And that actually plays back into what I spoke to earlier about Speak Your Truth,
Right.
because we were basically making a movie about our hometown, the things that are happening
Yeah.
around us.
Right. Right.
And when you're out among the real thing, you kind of have to tell the truth about them to some extent. And so that
Exactly.
shapes our script. And you can see that sort of production design and budgeting are happening in tandem with that, because as we're writing it around what we know we can get, or we're writing it around what we think we can get, but would be a stretch.
Hmm.
Honestly, this movie wasn't a huge stretch compared to past ones because it was so modest in scale compared to, say, a Civil War epic.
Right. Right.
But
Yes.
but we still had our moments. We were still nailing down locations, 2 days before the shoot, that kind of thing.
Wow.
It,
And
it's always a race.
you said that you own these movies, so
That's right.
you are racing financing yourself, your partners and you.
We self-finance, myself and my partners. We either contribute funds, most of which came from a previous film, or in some cases we're contributing hours. I mean, we have one partner who has never contributed a dime, and we don't ever expect him to,
Okay.
because he is our sound guy, and he masterminds everything that comes out of Speak in relation to our movie. When I was at North by Northwest Entertainment, they had a distribution arm, and we were always getting stuff kicked back for QC, quality control. It
Mm.
was always on the sound side, never
Oh,
on the picture side.
okay.
So I swore when I went independent, that was not going to trip us up. So one of our partners is a sound expert right there on the board, there to advocate for it, mastermind it, do whatever he can for it. Like I say, he's never put in a cent, but he's put in so many hours. And our
Mm.
last movie, Christmas Pledge, just sailed right through everybody's QC. No issues.
Wow. That's great. And that's a good partner. So good for you. Now, how would you balance the heartwarming Christmas elements with other genres, for example, like a heist, creating a unique and appealing story?
That's not a problem we've tackled yet. We may in the future. What we were looking at specifically with our movie and what Bridgestone was specifically asking for was kind of almost a subgenre within a subgenre. They wanted not just a Christmas movie, but a Christmas rom-com, and a hallmarky Christmas rom-com at that. So we were working within those established genre payoffs and expectations, that kind of thing. As far as working outside that pen, we're still a few movies down the road from that kind of thing. We do have something in mind. I'm not sure how much I want to talk about it
Okay.
just yet,
Okay. Well,
but
but
I would say kind of a good lodestone is the original Charles Dickens Christmas Carol.
okay.
And in fact, when I was at North by Northwest Entertainment, I was also one of the script readers,
Hmm.
and we would get Christmas scripts, and often my prescription was a solid blast of pure Scrooge. This thing needs
Okay.
a Scrooge. This thing
Right.
needs, something more ominous, something more scary, something that's not all nonstop Christmas cheer,
Like a villain. I mean, you're saying that the Christmas movie
or just
needs a
engaging
villain.
with, or just engaging with the darker side of things. You don't necessarily even need a villain. A good example there would be some of your listeners may know the new Doctor Who series,
Hmm.
and that sometimes that goes to some very dark places without ever having a villain in certain episodes.
Do you have an example for a Christmas movie? I mean, you mentioned the Scrooge thing, but
Like I
something.
say, Christmas Carol is the lodestone,
Okay.
and there have been so many adaptations.
Right. Okay. So, how would you suggest screenwriters expand their network of producers? And do you suggest, you mentioned AFM,
Mhm.
networking film markets? If so, which ones? Competitions or utilizing online platforms?
A lot of that is kind of done for us, at least as far as marketing our film, by our distributor. They're the ones that go to these conferences, to go to these markets. At some point, we're aware that we need to get out there as well. We're still relatively early on in our business plan, and we don't yet have the budget for a lot of that kind of travel. But we have been reaching out to, other companies as well and other people who could go to places that BMG can't necessarily. BMG has always been open to us about the fact that a lot of their business is a lot of their success is based on being a niche distributor. And so if we have other ideas, then we need to be willing to talk to other people. They've even referred us to other distributors for other ideas we've had. So that's part of it. Beyond that, like I say, we're a bunch of independent-minded bullheads. So we
Okay.
perhaps do this less than someone else, other people might if they were going the conventional route. That is, like I say, doing mostly screenwriting, and then once you got a script, take it to an agent, and then start working through the networks. Again, that's not. We have a different business plan.
Okay. Uh, when you're doing a new movie, is BMG in before you start shooting, or you shoot it first and then you try to sell it?
The first two movies, they were not in. There was no discussion at that time. But the third movie, absolutely yes. In fact, they were kind of the impetus behind it, and there was a constant rapport going on as we were making it. They were never telling us what to do or how to do it. We would run ideas by them. What do you think of this? How do you think the market would respond to this? How do you respond to this? And it was always pretty favorable, like, oh yeah, yeah, I get where you're going with this. And we also picked up some very useful things to know. One thing that surprised us was BMG also had a Christmas movie, which, forgive me, I'll decline to name. It wasn't a
Okay.
match made at Christmas,
Okay.
which apparently didn't do as well as they expected to. And the reason is their market segment includes a fair number of evangelical Christians.
Okay.
And this Christmas movie had ghosts in it. They were friendly ghosts, like even friendlier than Christmas Carol ghosts. But apparently that was enough for some of the buyers to say, no, I don't think our people would go for that. And we were like, okay, that is very good to know.
Yeah, that is
And
good to know.
that is why Christmas Pledge is a straightforward workplace comedy with no supernatural elements.
Okay.
Just dodge those concerns altogether.
That's good to know. That's good to know. And that, I used to live in Asia, and that was a big censorship issue for the mainland Chinese. No ghosts.
Oh yes.
Yeah, no
Yes.
ghosts. So
It's different.
I try to avoid that too.
Different cultures approach any sign of ghost or supernatural very differently, and especially if you have a worldwide sort of thing going
Right.
on, you have to be extremely careful sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Okay. Now, you sort of already answered this next question, which I'm going to tweak it a little bit. Normally, I would say, do you attend film markets to pitch your projects, or do you rely on representatives, or a combination of both, which you sort of answered? Are you now like going to look for a rep, or is something you still want to be bullheaded and go completely independent?
We're like I say, we have to find a compromise between being complete bullheads and working with the market where it's at.
Right.
And again, it comes down to it's so tempting to say, oh, well, who cares about the market? Make what you want to make, be an artist.
No,
like,
no, no.
Like, no. It's like genre expectations and payoffs. Respect the payoffs. People have a reason for wanting those. Same thing with the market. People have a reason for wanting that. What is it? And once you've figured out what that is, then you can start speaking your truth and deconstructing it. And maybe the best way to put it is finding common ground with the market.
Right, right.
As far as exactly what battle plan we might have with that, that's a good question. Like I say, we're early on in this, and we may not fully engage with that until we have 2 or 3 movies under our belt, or I should say 2 or 3 more.
Right, right. Are you the sole writer with this partnership?
I'm the writer of the group.
That's great. The writer and director.
I'm the criminal mastermind.
Yeah. So
but we all bring different talents to the table.
Good. That's great. That's great. You've got your own company going there, and write the script, direct it, make it, finance it, sell it. It's perfect. You've got it all set up. So good on you.
It's a different way to do things, and I should admit that it's not necessarily for everyone.
True. So what is your favorite script you've written, and why? And it doesn't have to be produced yet.
My favorite script to this day remains Vivandier, the Civil War epic we did. And if you're wondering what the term means, it's the period term for a Civil War era battlefield nurse.
Okay.
And apparently the Vivandiers during the American Civil War were women who simply showed up and wanted help and refused to go away.
Wow.
And they even stitch themselves basically feminine versions of the uniform of their side, and they would be out on the battlefield, stitching guys back together, getting them back to camp, that kind of thing. They were relatively rare, but you will see them represented at almost any Civil War reenactment. They're a powerful part of the folklore. And what we constructed was an action movie around that, not like a
Wow.
stodgy historical thing, but an action movie around this female character. And another thing we figured on doing was this character is voiceless. So we're going to build a lead character that hardly ever speaks.
Wow.
She only speaks in two scenes, and it's maybe half a dozen lines each. Other than that, she's silent for the rest of the movie, speaks entirely through her actions. That was one of the best challenges we've ever had.
I'll
And
say.
it's one of the things we're proudest of, that we pulled all that off and did a whole Civil War epic in the background to boot.
Amazing. So, is this online or?
It is. It is. It's available through BMG Global along with our two other films. Just
Okay.
Google Vivandier movie. It should come right up.
I'll put the links in the show notes. Now, getting a movie made can be stressful. How do you maintain a work-life balance? Do you have any hobbies? Do you have time for any hobbies, I should say?
Not while I'm shooting. The rest of the time, yes. As far as when we're actually, in production is a relatively short period. One thing that helps alleviate a lot of stress for us is the fact that we are in control. We don't have to answer directly to a studio. We don't get like notes from the studio the day before we shoot something saying, "Oh no, you're going to do something totally different."
Right.
It's like we get to make all the calls. We still have to wrangle with weather, and shooting in winter, you may have people getting sick, you may have this, you may have that. I think I mentioned that on Christmas Pledge, sometimes we didn't nail down a location until like 2 days beforehand.
Wow.
But it does remove a lot of stressors when you don't have someone else who doesn't really know what's going on trying to tell you the best way to do things.
How big is your cast typically, for example, on the Christmas movie?
For Christmas Pledge, we resolved that we were going to be small, not just for reasons of budget, but also to keep it sort of a tight, cozy Christmas atmosphere.
Right.
We sort of budgeted ourselves 6 speaking roles.
That's great.
And I think there was a day player or two, and I think we had all of 3 extras.
That is amazing.
And we built the whole movie around that.
And that's a skill. That's a skill to pull off. And good on you. So, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I'm thinking back on my younger self, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure I would have liked that little jerk.
When it comes to making Christmas movies.
When it comes to making Christmas movies, I guess I would tell him back then, I've always been a bit of that Bill Watterson type bullhead. The thing I would tell him is you can go your own way and still respect things like respect the market, respect genre payoffs, understand the reasons they exist, and be able to find common ground with them. You can be a completely independent person and still work with these tools.
I think that's great because, it shows you that Christmas movies don't have to be so formulaic. And like you just proved with the Christmas Pledge, the girl doesn't have to decide between the job and the life in this small town. So yeah, that is good for people. I think writers need to hear that. You don't have to be a slave to, dare I say, tropes, Christmas movie tropes.
As we're fond of saying, tropes are tools. They're not guidelines, they're not lanes, they're not limitations. They are tools.
Exactly.
And you need to decide what you're crafting and what tool works best. I mean, if you're hiring a carpenter, you wouldn't tell them you need to use this type of saw.
Right.
I won't take it if you don't use that type of saw.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now that you've sold your first Christmas script, do you have any special tips for writers on making their first sale?
Given that we've technically never made a sale,
Okay, well, got it off the ground and got distribution.
oh golly, I suppose my advice would have to be aimed at writers who would be going the way that I am. And maybe the first place to start there is decide for yourself which way you want to go. It's a new world now, and if you got the skills and the interest, you can do something like be, a totally independent writer, director, producer, making your own stuff, and not necessarily working with a studio from the get-go. If you want to, you can go that way. There's nothing wrong with, going the conventional route that most people do and, encounter great success. You've just got to decide what works for you and go that way. And if you do go my way, if you do go, or our way, I should say, again, I would say the most important thing is be observant and speak your truth. Not just look around at the world, look around and recognize that the world is not a stereotype and the world is not necessarily limiting you. It's giving you tools. And if you work with those, you can make something wonderful.
That's good. It's very good to hear. Now, to wrap up, would you like to share any social media details or website links so our audience can keep track of your work?
The main one to share is the link tree for our last movie, Christmas Pledge. And I sent that to you in the notes, so that can just be added to the show notes. It's a full list of all the links related to that movie, all the social medias, and all the places where you can see it, all the places where you can review it, if you're so inclined.
Great. Well, James, thank you for sharing your truth. Thank you for being on the podcast today. This was very enjoyable.
All right. Thank you for having me.
And now for my takeaways. I have 4 from my interview with James. Number 1, expectations in Christmas movies. James discussed the challenges of balancing audience expectations while staying fresh and not predictable in Christmas movies. He emphasized the importance of understanding and respecting genre payoffs and exploring unique character arcs, such as not forcing the protagonist to choose between a career and a small-town life. Number 2, script writing and the production process. James shared that he retains ownership of his work and finances his own movies, often securing locations just before shooting. He emphasized the importance of connections in securing locations and noted that he tries to write around what they can realistically obtain. Number 3, beware of ghosts. There are several romantic comedies in the Christmas genre that use friendly ghosts in the plot. James found out the hard way that this is not a big seller if you, by chance, are marketing to evangelicals. Who would have guessed? I mention this because I, in the past, wrote Chinese co-productions, and you could never add ghosts, or the script would not pass censorship. It's funny that James and I have that in common. The lesson is, know your buyer. Number 4, 2 paths. One path to making Christmas movies is the DIY method. Now, there is, of course, the conventional route, or the DIY, which is you are the writer, director, producer, making your own stuff route. Both are great. You just have to decide what works for you. If you go the independent writer, director, producer route, speak your truth. Recognize the world is not a stereotype and not limiting you. Tropes are tools. You are not limited by them. Well, that's the show. If you get value out of the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating so others can find this podcast. When you search for podcasts and see one with a few 5-star ratings and one with lots of 5-star ratings, chances are you'll download the one with a lot of 5-star ratings. The more ratings we get, the more listeners we'll attract. The more listeners we attract, the more guests we'll get. So it's a win-win to leave a 5-star rating. And I'd like to give a big shout out, big thanks to Janet for buying me a cup of coffee, or hot cocoa in my case. You can buy me a coffee on my website, which of course fuels more content. Just go to www.christmasmoviescreenwriter.com. And on our next podcast, the guest will be Christine Conrant. She is a prolific writer, producer, director with, as of this recording, 82 writing credits, 28 producing credits, and 8 directing credits. She talks about how to improve your pitch, conflict in Christmas movies, and networking strategies for writers. I'm your host, Caryn McCann. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next Christmas Movie Screenwriter podcast. Bye.